Martin did not wait for the ceremony to start. He grabbed Lisa's phone from inside her bouquet of white roses so violently that petals scattered across the bridal suite floor. Before she could even gasp, he crushed it beneath his heel. The screen shattered into a spiderweb of glass, and Lisa felt something inside her chest crack along with it. "You won't be needing this anymore," Martin said, and his voice was cold in a way she had never heard before. I've already explained the situation to the people who matter." Lisa stood frozen in her lace wedding gown, the intricate floral patterns suddenly feeling like chains against her skin. Her veil hung over her face like a shroud. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew. She had known for days, maybe weeks. The late-night phone calls Martin took in the hallway, the way he flinched every time a car door slammed outside their apartment, and the way he had stopped looking her in the eyes. Martin turned away from her, adjusting his navy blue suit in the mirror with shaking hands. "The wedding is just for show, Lisa. After the vows, some people are going to come talk to you. You're going to go with them quietly, and you're not going to make a scene." "Go with them?" Lisa's voice was rising now, panic clawing its way up her throat. "Martin, what did you do?" He spun around, and for the first time she saw it. Guilt, shame, and the face of a man who had already sold something that was never his to give. "I had debts, Lisa. Bad debts. The kind you don't walk away from. They gave me a choice, and I made it." The room tilted. Lisa reached out for the vanity to steady herself, her hand landing on the same phone Martin had just destroyed. The broken screen cut into her palm, but she barely felt it. "You sold me," she said, and it wasn't a question. "I saved myself," Martin corrected. Yeah, and there was something almost defiant in his tone now, as if he had convinced himself he had made the only rational decision. "They were going to kill me, Lisa. What was I supposed to do?" Lisa looked down at her hand. Blood was dripping from her palm onto the white fabric of her dress, spreading like a confession. And then she remembered. The backup phone. The one she kept hidden in the lining of her purse. Was the one Martin didn't know about because she had learned a long time ago that secrets were survival. She moved before she could think, grabbing her clutch from the chair and backing toward the bathroom. Martin lunged for her, but she was faster. She slammed the door and locked it, her hands shaking so badly she could barely pull the phone from its hiding place. Her brother. She needed to text her brother. He would know what to do. He would come get her. Her fingers flew across the screen, in tears blurring her vision as she typed, "He sold me. Church of St. Jude. Help me." She hit send, and then she realized, the last digit. She had hit the wrong number. In her panic, her finger had slipped, and the message had gone to a stranger, to someone who would delete it or ignore it or... Outside the bathroom door, Martin was pounding, shouting her name. Lisa could hear other voices now, too, deep and unfamiliar, the sound of men who had come to collect what they were owed. And she sank to the floor, her wedding dress pooling around her like ocean water, and waited for the door to break. 15 miles away, in the back of a black luxury sedan crawling through city traffic, Young Chul sat perfectly still. His slicked back hair caught the passing streetlights, casting sharp shadows across his face. The tattoos that coiled across his neck and chest were hidden beneath an open-collared white shirt and black suit jacket. But anyone who knew what to look for could see the way he carried himself. The controlled violence, the certainty of a man who had never been told no and survived. He was bored. The meeting he had just left had been a waste of time, all posturing and empty threats from men who thought money made them powerful. He was about to tell his driver to take him home when his phone buzzed. Young Chul glanced at the screen, expecting another message from his second-in-command, on another problem that needed his attention. Instead, he saw a number he didn't recognize, and a message that made him sit forward. "He sold me. Church of St. Jude. Help me." Young Chul read it 3 times. His thumb hovered over the screen, and something cold and sharp settled in his chest. He knew that church, and he knew exactly what kind of business was conducted in its shadow. He leaned forward. "Change of plans," he said to his driver. "Church of St. Jude, on now." The driver didn't ask questions. He simply turned the wheel, and the car surged forward into the night. Young Chul looked back down at his phone, at the desperate message from a woman he had never met, and made a decision that would change everything. Back at the church, the bathroom door splintered open. Martin stood in the doorway, his face red and twisted with rage and fear. "Get up!" he hissed, grabbing Lisa by the arm and hauling her to her feet. "You're going to walk down that aisle, and you're going to smile. And when this is over, you're going to go with them like we agreed." "We never agreed to anything," Lisa said, and her voice was steadier than she expected. "You decided. You chose this." "I chose to live," Martin snapped. He dragged her toward the door, and Lisa stumbled, her bare feet catching on the hem of her dress. She could see them now, the men waiting in the hallway. 3 of them, dressed in dark suits, and their faces blank and professional. They looked at her the way someone might look at furniture being delivered. One of them checked his watch. "Ceremony starts in 5 minutes, he said to Martin. "Make it convincing." Martin nodded, his grip on Lisa's arm tightening until she could feel her bones grinding together. And then they were moving, out of the bridal suite and down the hallway, past her bridesmaids who smiled and waved, and completely unaware that they were watching a woman walk to her execution. The church was full. Every pew was packed with people Lisa had known her entire life, all of them dressed in their finest, all of them waiting to watch her marry a man who had traded her life for $50,000. Lisa stood at the back of the church, her bouquet trembling in her hands, and felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on her. Martin was already at the altar, smiling that same charming smile he had used when he proposed, when he promised her forever, when he lied. The music started, the processional. Lisa's cue to walk. She didn't move. One of the men in dark suits appeared at her elbow. "Walk," he said quietly, "or we carry you." Lisa took a step forward, then another. The aisle stretched out before her like a plank, and at the end of it was Martin, and beyond Martin was a future she couldn't even begin to imagine. She was halfway down the aisle when the church doors exploded open behind her. Before we continue, please do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because this story is about to change in ways nobody expects. The sound that came through those church doors wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. It was the kind of silence that makes noise stop, the click of expensive shoes on marble, the whisper of fabric moving with lethal precision, the held breath of 200 people who suddenly understood they were witnessing something they shouldn't see. Lisa turned, her veil sliding across her face, and saw him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, Korean, dressed in black from head to toe, his suit so perfectly tailored it looked like armor. His hair was slicked back, revealing a face that could have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and cold calculation. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Dark, unblinking, fixed on her like she was the only person in the entire church. Behind him, 4 men fanned out, their hands resting inside their jackets in a way that made several guests shift nervously in their pews. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence said everything. At the altar, Martin had gone white. "Who?" he started, but his voice cracked. The man in black didn't acknowledge him. He walked down the aisle with the kind of unhurried confidence that came from knowing no one would dare stop him. His eyes never left Lisa's face. One of the men in dark suits, the collectors Martin had made his deal with, stepped forward from the side of the church. "This is a private matter," he said, his hand moving toward his waistband. The man in black stopped. He didn't turn his head. He simply raised one finger, and the four men behind him moved in perfect synchronization. And the collector froze, suddenly aware that there were guns pointed at him from multiple angles, all of them silenced, all of them steady. "I suggest you reconsider," the man in black said, and his voice was quiet, but it carried through the church like a judge's verdict. He had a slight accent, Korean threading through his English, making every word sound deliberate and final. The collector's hand moved away from his waistband. Slowly. The man in black continued walking. He passed Lisa's mother in the front pew, who had her hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. He passed Lisa's father, who half rose from his seat before thinking better of it. He passed the bridesmaids clustered together like frightened birds. And then he was standing in front of Lisa, close enough that she could see the tattoos that crept up from beneath his collar, intricate dark designs that spoke of a world she had only heard about in whispers, and close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and sharp, like smoke and cedar. "You sent me a message," he said, and it wasn't a question. Lisa couldn't speak. Her throat had closed completely. She could only stare at this stranger who had walked into her wedding like he owned it, like he owned everything. She managed, but nothing else would come. Martin found his voice. "This is a mistake," he said, his words tumbling over each other in his desperation. "There's been a misunderstanding. She doesn't know you. This is our wedding. You need to leave." The man in black turned his head slowly to look at Martin. It was the kind of look a predator gives prey before deciding whether it's worth the effort to kill. "Your wedding," he repeated, and the words dripped with contempt. Martin took a step back, then another. "Do you know who I am?" the man in black asked, and his voice was still quiet, still calm, but there was something underneath it now, and something that made the hair on the back of Lisa's neck stand up. Martin shook his head, his hands trembling. "My name is Young Chul," the man said, and several people in the congregation gasped. Lisa saw the color drain from the faces of the collectors, saw them exchange glances that spoke of terrible mistakes and irreversible consequences. "And I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I don't," Martin started, but Young Chul raised his hand and Martin's voice died mid-sentence. Young Chul reached into his jacket pocket, and every person in the church tensed. But what he pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a phone. He held it up, the screen facing Martin, and Lisa could see her own message displayed there, the desperate words she had typed in the bathroom while Martin pounded on the door. "He sold me," Young Chul read aloud, his accent making each word sound like an accusation. "Church of St. Jude, help me." He lowered the phone and looked at Martin. "Now, would you care to explain what this means?" Martin's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. She must have... It was an accident. "An accident," Young Chul repeated. He turned back to Lisa, and his expression softened just slightly, just enough that she could see something that might have been concern beneath the cold authority. Was it an accident? Lisa looked at Martin. She looked at the man she had planned to spend her life with the man who had smiled at her over candlelit dinners and whispered promises in the dark, the man who had sold her to strangers for the price of a used car. "No," she said, and her voice was steady for the first time all day. "It wasn't an accident." Young Chul nodded once, as if this confirmed something he already knew. He turned back to Martin. "You made a deal," he said, "with them." He gestured toward the collectors who were trying very hard to become invisible against the wall. "You sold her to settle your gambling debts." It wasn't a question, but Martin answered anyway, his voice breaking. "They were going to kill me. I didn't have a choice." "You had a choice," Young Chul said. "You chose yourself." He took a step closer to Martin, and Martin stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. The priest, who had been standing frozen this entire time, made a small sound of distress and hurried to the side of the altar. "How much?" Young Chul asked. "See what?" "How much was she worth to you? What price did you put on a human life?" Martin didn't answer. He couldn't seem to form words anymore. Young Chul turned to the collectors. "How much?" The lead collector, a heavy-set man with a scar running through his eyebrow, cleared his throat. 50,000, he said reluctantly. The church erupted in gasps and whispers. Lisa felt the number hit her like a physical blow. $50,000. That was all she had been worth to Martin, when not even enough to buy a decent car. Young Chul was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, almost gentle, but somehow that made it more terrifying. 50,000, he said. You sold the woman you claimed to love for $50,000. Martin was shaking now, his whole body trembling like he was standing in a blizzard. Please, he whispered. Please, I'll find another way to pay. I'll get the money. Just, please. Young Chul reached into his jacket again, and when this time, several people in the congregation stood up, ready to run. But what he pulled out was a checkbook. He clicked open a pen with his thumb, wrote something quickly, and tore out the check. He handed it to the lead collector. Consider the debt paid, Young Chul said. Now leave. The collector looked at the check and his eyes widened. He looked at Young Chul, then at Martin, then back at the check. Sir, this is 3 times what he owes. Then consider it interest, Young Chul said, for wasting my time. Leave, now. The collectors didn't need to be told twice. They moved toward the side exit, walking quickly but not quite running, like children who had been caught doing something forbidden. The door closed behind them with a soft click that seemed to echo through the church. Young Chul turned back to Martin. As for you, he said, and there was something final in his tone, something that sounded like a door closing forever. Your debt is paid, but understand this. You will never speak to her again. You will never look at her. You will never breathe the same air as her if you can help it. Because if you do, if I hear that you have so much as said her name, I will revisit this conversation, and next time, I will not be so generous. Martin nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face now, his expensive suit rumpled and stained with sweat. Yes, I understand. Thank you. Thank you. Young Chul's expression didn't change. Get out of my sight! Martin ran. Actually ran, stumbling down the altar steps and up the aisle, past the shocked faces of his own family, past the groomsmen who stepped aside to let him pass. The church doors slammed open, and then he was gone, disappeared into the sunlight like a shadow burning away. The church was silent. Lisa could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. You could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on her, all of them trying to understand what had just happened, trying to make sense of the fact that her fiancé had just fled their wedding and a stranger had paid his debts. Young Chul turned to her. Up close, she could see that his eyes weren't entirely cold. There was something in them, something that looked almost like recognition, like he saw something in her that he understood. I received your invitation, he said quietly, and there was the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Lisa stared at him. I wasn't inviting you. I was trying to text my brother. I know, Young Chul said, but your message reached me instead, and I decided to accept. Why? The word came out as barely more than a whisper. Young Chul was quiet for a moment. He looked at her face, at the tears staining her cheeks, at the way she was holding herself together through sheer force of will. Because I know what it feels like to be sold," he said finally, "and I know what it feels like to have no one come when you call for help." Lisa felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, opening, like a door she didn't know she had been keeping locked. "What happens now?" she asked. Young Chul glanced around the church, at the congregation still frozen in their seats, at the priest who looked like he wanted to faint, at the bridesmaids whispering frantically to each other. "Now," he said, "you have a choice. You can stay here and face all of them, answer their questions, endure their pity and their judgment. Or," he held out his hand to her, palm up, an invitation, "or you can leave with me." Lisa looked at his hand. She looked at the church full of people who had come to watch her marry a man who had sold her. She looked at her mother, who was crying silently in the front pew, and her father, who looked angry and confused and completely helpless. She thought about Martin, about the way he had looked at her in the bridal suite, not with love, but with the desperate calculation of a man trying to save himself. She thought about the collectors, about how they had looked at her like she was merchandise. She thought about the broken phone on the bathroom floor and the message she had sent to the wrong number. And then she thought about the fact that this stranger, this dangerous, the powerful man with tattoos crawling up his neck and 4 armed guards at his back, had walked into a church and paid off her debts without asking for anything in return, had looked at Martin with the kind of contempt she had been too afraid to show, had called her choice an invitation, not a mistake. Lisa placed her hand in his. Young Chul's fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and certain. He nodded once, as if she had passed some kind of test, and then he turned to face the congregation, then keeping her hand in his. "This wedding is over," he announced, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the church. "If anyone has objections, you may voice them now." Silence. Absolute, total silence. Young Chul smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression Lisa had ever seen. "I thought not." He began to walk, and Lisa walked with him, her bare feet silent on the marble, her wedding dress rustling around her legs. They passed the pews full of shocked faces, or past her family and friends, past the photographer who was still recording everything with his camera raised like a shield. Young Chul's men fell into formation around them, moving with the kind of practiced precision that came from years of working together. One of them opened the church doors and sunlight poured in, warm and bright and blinding. Outside, a black SUV was waiting at the curb, its engine running. The back door was already open. Young Chul helped Lisa inside, then his hand on her elbow, guiding her as she gathered up the massive skirt of her dress. She slid across the leather seat, and he climbed in after her. The door closed with a heavy sound that felt like a seal being placed on a tomb. The SUV began to move immediately. Lisa turned to look out the back window and saw people spilling out of the church, saw them standing on the steps, pointing and shouting, saw phones raised to capture video of the vehicle as it drove away. She saw her father pushing through the crowd, his face red with fury, his mouth open as he yelled something she couldn't hear. And then the church was behind them, growing smaller and smaller until it was just a white speck in the distance. Lisa turned back around and found young Chul watching her. He hadn't spoken since they got in the car, hadn't moved, had simply sat there with his hands resting on his knees, waiting for her to process what had just happened. "Where are we going?" Lisa asked, and she was surprised by how calm her voice sounded. "Somewhere you'll be safe," young Chul said. "Somewhere no one will bother you while you decide what you want to do next." "What I want to do next," Lisa repeated. She almost laughed, but it came out as something closer to a sob. "I don't even know what just happened. I don't know who you are. I don't know why you did what you did." Young Chul leaned back in his seat, his dark eyes never leaving her face. What do you want to know?" "Everything," Lisa said. "I want to know why a stranger walked into my wedding and saved me. I want to know how you got my message when I was trying to text my brother. I want to know what you meant when you said you know what it feels like to be sold." Young Chul was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, the city was passing by. Buildings and cars and people going about their normal lives, completely unaware of the chaos that had just unfolded. "My mother," Young Chul said finally, his voice softer than she had heard it before, "was sold when I was 7 years old, not to pay a debt, not because of gambling, simply because my father decided she was worth more as a transaction than as a wife." Lisa felt her breath catch. "I was too young to stop it," Young Chul continued, "too powerless. I watched them take her away, and I couldn't do anything except watch. By the time I was old enough, strong enough, rich enough to find her, she was already gone. She died in a factory in Thailand, worked to death by people who bought her for less than the cost of a car." He looked out the window, and for just a moment his carefully controlled expression cracked, and Lisa saw the grief underneath, raw and old, and never quite healed. "So when I received your message," Young Chul said, turning back to her, "when I saw those words, 'He sold me,' I made a decision. I decided that if I couldn't save my mother, I could at least save you." Lisa felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she didn't try to stop them. "You don't even know me." "No," Young Chul agreed, "but I know what it's like to be traded like property. And I know what it's like to have no one come when you call for help. I didn't want that for you." "The message," Lisa said. "How did you get it?" "I was trying to text my brother." Young Chul's expression became unreadable. "Your fiancé, your former fiancé, has been on my radar for months. One was gambling debts, his connections to certain organizations. I've been monitoring his communications, waiting to see if he would become a problem." He paused. "When you sent that text, it was intercepted, rerouted. I made sure it reached me instead of whoever you were trying to contact." Lisa stared at him. "You've been watching Martin?" "Watching many people," Young Chul said. "Martin was simply one of them. I didn't know about you until today. But when I saw that message, I knew I had to act." The car turned down a tree-lined street, the buildings getting taller and more expensive with every block. Lisa looked down at her wedding dress, at the lace and silk that had cost thousands of dollars, at the bloodstain on her palm where the broken phone had cut her skin. "What happens now?" she asked. "You said I'm safe, but safe from what? Martin? The collectors? My own family?" "All of them," Young Chul said. "You're under my protection now. No one will touch you. No one will even think about touching you." "And what does that cost me?" Lisa asked, because she had learned today that nothing was free, that every gesture had a price. Young Chul met her eyes. "Nothing," he said simply. "I'm not Martin. I don't trade in human lives. You're not a commodity. You're not something I bought or own. You're someone who needed help and I provided it. That's all." "That's all," Lisa repeated, and she wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that this stranger with the dangerous eyes and the loaded gun under his jacket was telling her the truth. But she had trusted Martin, and look where that had gotten her. The car pulled up in front of a building that looked like it cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Glass and steel and modern architecture that seemed to touch the sky. The driver got out and opened Lisa's door, and Young Chul helped her step onto the sidewalk, his hand steady under her elbow. "This is my building," Young Chul said. "The penthouse is secure, safe. You can stay there as long as you need." Lisa looked up at the building, at the doorman who had appeared from nowhere to hold the door, at the marble lobby visible through the glass. And then she looked at Young Chul, at this man who had walked into her nightmare and pulled her out of it. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. Young Chul smiled, and it was sad and knowing and somehow gentle. "You shouldn't," he said. Us trust is something you earn, and I haven't earned yours yet. But I'm asking you to give me the chance to try." Lisa took a breath, then another, and then she stepped inside. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor. The elevator opened directly into a foyer where black marble met floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city like a kingdom spread out below. Lisa stepped inside, and the doors closed behind her with a whisper, sealing her into a world that looked nothing like the life she had known just hours ago. Young Chul walked ahead of her, shrugging out of his jacket and draping it over a chair with casual grace. Without the jacket, she could see more of the tattoos, intricate designs that wound up his arms and disappeared beneath his white shirt. Dragons and flowers and symbols she didn't recognize. "The guest room is down that hall," he said, pointing without looking at her. "Second door on the left. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you. Help yourself to anything you need." Lisa stood frozen in her wedding dress, still clutching the bouquet she had somehow carried all the way from the church. White roses, now crushed and wilting from her grip. Young Chul noticed. He walked over to her, and she tensed, but he only reached out slowly and took the bouquet from her hands. "You don't need to hold on to this anymore," he said quietly, and he walked to a trash bin and dropped the flowers inside. Lisa watched them disappear and felt something release in her chest. "I don't understand you," she said. Young Chul turned back to her. "What don't you understand?" "Any of this. Why you're being kind. What you want from me. Why you're not." She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Not what?" Young Chul asked, his voice gentle. "Not like Martin," she whispered. Young Chul's expression hardened, but not at her, or at the mention of the name. "I told you," he said. "I'm not Martin. I don't see people as things to be traded. My mother was treated like merchandise, and it killed her. I won't do that to anyone else." He walked to the windows and stood with his back to her, looking out at the city. "You're safe here. That's all I'm offering. Safety. Time to breathe. Time to figure out what you want to do next." He paused. "I won't touch you. I won't ask you for anything. You're not a prisoner. You're a guest." Lisa wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But trust felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. "I'm going to change," she said finally. Young Chul nodded without turning around. "Take your time." The guest room was bigger than the apartment she had shared with Martin. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, dressed in white linens that looked like they'd never been slept in. The closet was indeed full of clothes, expensive designer pieces in her size, which should have comforted her but instead sent a chill down her spine. He had known. He had known she would say yes, had known she would come here. Lisa stripped out of the wedding dress with shaking hands, letting it pool on the floor like a shed skin. She found black pants and a simple silk blouse and pulled them on, feeling more like herself in strangers' clothes than she had in the custom gown Martin had insisted she wear. When she emerged, young Chul was sitting on the couch with a glass of whiskey, his phone in his other hand. He glanced up as she approached but said nothing, just gestured to the seat across from him. Lisa sat. They stayed like that for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. "Your family will be looking for you," young Chul said eventually. "I know." "Do you want me to contact them? Let them know you're safe?" Lisa thought about her mother's tears, her father's rage, and the questions they would ask that she didn't have answers to. "Not yet," she said. Young Chul nodded and took a sip of his whiskey. "When you're ready, then." The days that followed had a strange, suspended quality, like living in a photograph. Young Chul came and went at odd hours, always dressed in perfectly tailored suits, always surrounded by the quiet men who served as his shadow. He was polite, distant. He treated her with a careful respect that felt almost clinical, like she was something fragile he was afraid of breaking. He never asked her questions, never pressed her for conversation. He simply existed in the same space as her, a constant, controlled presence that was somehow both comforting and terrifying. Lisa spent her time exploring the penthouse, staring out at the city, trying to understand what her life had become. She slept in the guest room and woke up to find breakfast already prepared in the kitchen. She wandered the halls and found a library, a gym, rooms that looked like they'd never been used. It felt like a gilded cage, beautiful, comfortable, utterly isolated from everything she had known. On the fourth day, everything changed. Lisa was in the library when she heard the commotion, shouting from somewhere below, the sound of security guards mobilizing, and then Young Chul's voice, cold and sharp, cutting through the chaos. She moved to the door just as Young Chul appeared, his expression darker than she had ever seen it. "Stay here," he said. "What's happening?" "Martin," Young Chul said, and the name was a curse. "He's downstairs. My security is handling it." Lisa's blood went cold. "He found me?" "He was always going to find you," Young Chul said. "The question was when, not if." He paused. "Do you want to see him?" Lisa's first instinct was to say no, to hide, to let Young Chul's men drag Martin away and pretend this moment had never happened. But then she thought about the bathroom floor and about the shattered phone and the desperate message, about the way Martin had looked at her in the bridal suite, calculating her value like she was a stock option. "Yes," she said, "I want to see him." Young Chul studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Come with me." They took the elevator down to the lobby where Martin was being held between two security guards. He looked terrible, unwashed, unshaven, his expensive suit rumpled and stained. When he saw Lisa, on his face contorted with relief and desperation. "Lisa!" he shouted. "Lisa, thank God! You have to help me! Please, you have to!" "Let him speak," Young Chul said to his guards. They released Martin, who stumbled forward, nearly falling at Lisa's feet. "I'm so sorry," Martin said, the words tumbling out like water from a broken dam. "I'm so sorry for everything. I made a terrible mistake. I was desperate, and I wasn't thinking clearly, and—" "What do you want, Martin?" Lisa asked. One in her voice was flat, empty of the emotion she thought she would feel. Martin looked up at her, and she saw it then. The same calculation in his eyes that she had seen in the bridal suite. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here because he wanted something. "Your inheritance," Martin said, "from your grandmother. It's yours now, and I just need you to sign it over to me. Just temporarily. Just until I can get back on my feet. There are still people after me, Lisa. Dangerous people. And if I don't pay them—" Lisa laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even her. "You want my money," she said. "That's why you came here, not to apologize, not to make sure I'm okay. You want my inheritance." "It's not like that," Martin said desperately. "I love you. I've always loved you. I need help, and you're the only one who can—" "No," Lisa said. Martin blinked. "What?" "No," Lisa repeated, and the word felt like power in her mouth. "I'm not giving you anything. Not my money, not my time, not another second of my life." Martin's expression shifted from desperation to anger. "You owe me," he said, his voice rising. "After everything I've done for you, after all the years we were together—" "You sold me," Lisa said, and her voice cut through his like a blade. "You sold me for $50,000. You don't get to ask me for anything ever again." Martin lunged forward, and Young Chul moved faster than she had ever seen anyone move. One moment he was standing beside her. The next he was between them, one hand wrapped around Martin's throat, lifting him onto his toes. "You were warned," Young Chul said softly. "I told you what would happen if you came near her again." Martin's face was turning red, his hands clawing uselessly at Young Chul's arm. "Please," he choked out. "Please, I'm sorry, I'll leave, I'll never—" Young Chul released him, and Martin collapsed to the floor, gasping. "Get him out of here," Young Chul said to his guards, "and make sure he understands that if he comes back, I won't be so gentle." The guards hauled Martin to his feet and dragged him toward the door. He was crying now, begging, but Lisa felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a hollow emptiness where her love for him used to be. The doors closed behind Martin, and silence fell over the lobby. Young Chul turned to Lisa. "Are you all right?" Lisa nodded slowly. "I think so." "Come," Young Chul said. Let's go upstairs." Back in the penthouse, Young Chul poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Lisa. She took it, her hand steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "He'll come back," Lisa said. "He won't," Young Chul replied. "My men will make sure of that." Lisa took a sip of the whiskey, feeling it burn down her throat. "What happens now?" she asked. "I can't stay here forever." Young Chul was quiet for a moment. Then he set down his glass and looked at her with those dark, intense eyes. "You have a choice to make," he said. "What kind of choice?" Young Chul walked to a cabinet and opened it. Inside was a handgun, sleek and black and somehow beautiful in its deadliness. He took it out and placed it on the table between them. "You can leave," he said. "I'll give you money, protection, a fresh start somewhere Martin and his debts can't find you. Now you can walk away from all of this and build a new life." Lisa stared at the gun. Or you can stay," Young Chul said. "You can learn. I can teach you how to protect yourself, how to make sure no one ever sells you again, how to become the kind of person who decides her own fate instead of having it decided for her." Lisa looked up at him. "You're talking about joining your world." "I'm talking about becoming powerful enough that no one can ever hurt you again," Young Chul said. "The world I live in is dangerous, violent, unforgiving, but it's also a world where strength matters more than anything else, where the people who survive are the ones who refuse to be victims." He picked up the gun and held it out to her. "This is your choice, Lisa. Walk away with your freedom, or stay and learn how to take it yourself." Lisa looked at the gun. She thought about Martin on the floor, begging. She thought about the collectors who had looked at her like merchandise. And she thought about her entire life, always being told what to do, where to go, who to be. She thought about the woman in the bathroom mirror, trembling and terrified, and sending desperate messages to the wrong number. And then she thought about the woman who had looked Martin in the eye and said no. Lisa took the gun. "Teach me," she said. Young Chul smiled, and for the first time since she had met him, it reached his eyes. "All right," he said. "Then let's begin." 3 months later, now Lisa stood in Young Chul's office, watching through the window as Martin was led away in handcuffs. His remaining creditors had finally caught up with him, and without Lisa's inheritance to bail him out, he had nowhere left to run. She felt nothing as she watched him go. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a calm certainty that justice, in whatever form it took, had found its mark. "You've learned quickly," Young Chul said from behind her. Lisa turned. She was dressed differently now. Tailored pants, fitted jacket, her hair pulled back in a way that was both elegant and severe. She had learned to shoot, to negotiate, to read the subtle power dynamics that governed Young Chul's world. She had learned to be feared. "I had a good teacher," she said. Young Chul moved to stand beside her. "What will you do now?" Lisa looked out at the city. Martin was gone. Her old life was gone. How everything that had made her who she was had been burned away in the church that day, and what had risen from the ashes was something entirely new. "I'll stay," she said. "There's work to do." Young Chul nodded. then stay. And so she did. Not as someone who had been saved, not as someone who owed a debt, but as someone who had chosen her own path, who had looked at the choice between freedom and power and decided she wanted both. Martin's world crumbled. His debts consumed him. And his name became a cautionary tale, but Lisa's world expanded. She stood beside young Chul as an equal, a partner in an empire built on strength and survival. She became someone people whispered about, someone who commanded respect not through fear alone, but through the certainty that she would never, ever be sold again. And when the city lights flickered on below them, casting shadows across the penthouse floor, Lisa stood at the window and smiled. She had been traded once, valued at $50,000. Now she was priceless.